Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Nigeria's central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, shared the policy direction of his new tenure on Monday. The vision of the bank for the next 5 years is to work closely with the fiscal authorities to target a double-digit growth, bring down inflation to single digit, generate about 12 billion non-oil exports by 2023, and raise financial inclusion to 95% level by 2024. Joining us now to analyze this new policy direction is the Managing Director of Cowry Asset Management, Chukwu. Chukwu, good to have you again.
Good morning,
on
sir.
the morning show.
It's my pleasure to be here with you guys.
Yeah, it's really nice to see you. Now, what's your assessment of the 5-year policy direction plan that has just been unveiled by the CBN governor? Is it something new? Is it something familiar? Are the targets that he has set, are they achievable?
Well, clearly, the targets he set are the overall economic target of the country. I mean, if you look at each of those parameters he mentioned, in reducing the level of inflation to single digit, increasing growth rates, GDP growth rate to double digit, financial inclusion of 95% by 2024. Those are basically the overarching policies of the government, or what the government policies should be in terms of economic development. Because one of the key challenges we have is that the economy is growing at a very slow rate. You have macroeconomic instability because you have one high interest rate. We have high inflation rate. He also talked of inflation, single-digit inflation. So these are basic things. But the unfortunate thing is that the capacity to carry out some of these pronouncements will be highly dependent on the policies of the fiscal authorities. And that's why he made addition to the fact that he will want to work closely with the fiscal authorities. But whether you work closely with fiscal authorities or not will depend on the policies of the fiscal authorities. And right now, we don't have a Minister of Finance. We don't even have a clear orientation of what the government's economic policy is. The government has been dancing between command and control economy and some mix of free market economy. We need to have even the orientation of the government as it relates to how they want to drive economic growth. And so for me, the challenge you have is that with the best of intention, the efforts by the central bank governor to accomplish some of these pronouncements will be largely dependent on the fiscal environment.
So that vacuum still exists, which could explain, or maybe not, some of the vagueness in this 5-year plan. Like there was a plan to boost lending, to spur, customers, and no detail. So you tell us, what should that look like?
Well, the defined details they will come up with. For instance, when he said they will encourage mortgage lending and consumer lending. To encourage mortgage lending and consumer lending, a lot of things have to come in. Let's take, for instance, mortgage lending. Because Nigerians have very low per capita income, the average wages of an average employee in Nigeria is very low and cannot effectively service a mortgage loan. So for central bank to encourage lending to mortgage banks for mortgages, then it has to work with the fiscal authority at the state and federal level to bring down the cost of properties, buildings. In that case, you're talking of maybe a situation where there's risk sharing, where the government provides land and makes subsidized land and then make it the cost of building to be cheaper. That way, an average employee would be able to pay a mortgage. And then the next thing the central bank will do is to look for maybe the loan finance initiative that will be availed to mortgage banks so that they can lend at suboptimal or below market rates. So, but these are factors that have to come into place. So it's not just enough to say, with the intention you want to encourage mortgage lending, you have to look at, can anybody actually take mortgage at 20% and pay back? It's impossible. Okay. Can an average employee who earns 30,000 naira take a mortgage of 5 million naira? He will never be able to pay it over his lifetime. So these are factors that have to come into place, which I say, look, his ability to accomplish some of these things, so the detail that will come will be dependent on the fiscal policy environment. We already have an institution like Nigerian Mortgage Refinancing Company, which unfortunately we're not even seeing its effectiveness now because it looks like there's a shift in government policy. For that agency or government body to be effective in supporting mortgages, some of these factors have come into place. Take, for instance, the issue of consumer lending. when you talk of consumer lending, a couple of things have to come into place. Identity card management, identity management, so that the person who borrows in Kaduna and comes to Kano and runs to Kano can still be tracked and trapped. So you have to talk of single identity management. You have to talk of the cost of such lending, because if you have a high interest rate, it's impossible for you to borrow for consumption. So a lot of it would have been impossible for him to define the fine details in that policy document.
So before we move on, you just mentioned that the government could subsidize land. That reminds me of the comments by Emir of Kano about subsidy and its crippling effect, well, a bankrupting effect on Nigeria's economy. He's saying that the government's policy of subsidizing petroleum products and electricity is making us bankrupt. Your take?
Well, you know, basic thing is that what the central bank governor, former central bank governor was referring to, the Emir of Kano, is that subsidizing consumption is not the way to go. There's actually nothing wrong with subsidy as an item to encourage economic activities. It is what you subsidize. You don't subsidize what you don't produce locally. You don't subsidize consumption because it leads to abnormal behavior. I take, for instance, the issue of subsidy on petroleum products. He did mention the fact that we spend about 1.5 trillion naira on subsidizing petroleum products. That during his time as CBN governor, that we earned $16 billion from export of crude oil. We spent $8 billion in importing refined petroleum products and used $8.2 billion to subsidize those imported products. He also made addition that in 2016, that the government said that the average consumption of petroleum products, PMS, it was 28 million barrels per day. That today they're talking of 60 million barrels per day, why I made that statement that when you subsidize consumption, it leads to abnormal behavior. So where is the 60 million liters of petroleum product? Why is it being consumed locally? The economy has not expanded, it has actually shrunk. Yeah. So you cannot say that the economy has expanded so much that the number of vehicles on the road have increased by 100% as to lead to doubling of our consumption. So because when you have subsidized consumption, the tendency is that you will encourage corruption.
Opaqueness.
So I'd like to take you back to the 95% financial inclusion rate that you mentioned earlier, which of course we know is a part of Emefiele's plan from the CBN. Now, he said that a part of this is working with NIBs, banks and fintechs to ensure that he actually achieves this. And fintechs are great because they obviously target the unbanked based on the zero to low intra-bank rates and other things such as easier access to loans and access to new technology. Yet the CBN is going to have to ensure that they protect their viability in some way so that they don't get crushed by bigger banks, especially if Emefiele wants to put Nigerian banks in the top 500 in the world over this time span as well. How do you think the CBN is going to go about this?
Well, what the central bank will do is to bring in a lot of alternative service delivery in terms of providing financial services to the unbanked. And I give you a classical example. When you talk of payment institutions that central bank introduced recently, some of the payment institutions that are non-banks are institutions like pharmaceutical settings or chemists in rural areas, where through the payment platform that the central bank will provide, an average person can receive payment on your mobile phone and go to a nearby chemist and get it cashed. So this chemist serves as an alternative payment delivery channel. So we are not going to have a situation where the bank will actually expand, which is why he said he's going to leverage on technology and then introduce alternative payment systems or partner financial institutions or partner banks that are not financial institutions as a body. Again, remember that the likes of the telcos are being licensed as payment gateways.
Yeah.
So and you look at the pervasiveness of the telco services, today we have more than 150 million active telephone lines. So with that active line, you almost have every Nigerian adult has a telephone. So the implication is that through those telephones, those who are living in areas where they are not physical, they don't have physical access to financial institution, could actually enjoy some level of financial services through their telephones. And again, they're also simplifying the process of account opening. So you don't need to go and fill a large pool of documents to open an account. You can actually open an account using your telephone, given that your telephone, you now have your BVN, and through your telephone, you have your banking bank verification number. And because your telephone is also a unique identity instrument, you can have a relationship with financial institutions using your telephone. So the basic thing that the government is, central bank is going to introduce multiple channels of financial services delivery that will allow those who live in places where you don't have physical access to financial institutions to enjoy financial services.
What do you think of the proposal by the CBN to provide improved seedlings for smallholder farmers and also incentive in terms of access to credit across 10 commodities: rice, cassava, maize, cotton, and then fish, poultry, livestock, and dairy? Because that's also a major part of that 5-year projection.
Yeah, for me, what the central bank should do is to look for the appropriate government agencies to work with, so that it doesn't stretch itself too thin. Issue of providing improved seedlings to farmers should not be that of the central bank. What the central bank should focus on is providing development finance initiative funding to the rural farmers, or even of course, there are already a lot of credit going to commercial agricultural operators. But the basic thing is that how do we provide funding, which is what they are alluding to. They want to support the rural farmers by providing credits. But beyond providing credit, if you go backward to that of providing seedlings, you are going to be taking the risk that central bank should not be dealing with. There are ministries of agriculture at the state levels. The Ministry of Agriculture should develop a station services, and through the station services, they should be able to educate the rural farmers on the best seedlings and possibly give them access to accessing those best high-quality seedlings. But for central bank to be in charge of providing such seedlings, for me, it will be overburdening itself with what it shouldn't have to deal with.
Now, the proposal also raises the NERSAL FMB, Microfinance Credit Bank, as a scheme to improve access to credit for rural MSMEs. There have been several schemes like this in the past that have failed. The money was made available, the funds were available, but the farmers were still not able to access them. What makes NERSAL FMB different, or what will make it different in its implementation?
You know, interestingly, I've actually battled with the issue of NERSAL FMB. In the first place, that they are microfinance banks. And this is going to be another like of People's Bank. And we should avoid creating such humongous government-driven financial institutions that end up not achieving anything, and just be a drain pipe to the national purse. They are microfinance banks. The microfinance banks should have access to the rural areas.
Mr. Chukwu, hold your thoughts. We just need to take a short break. We'll be back to talk about this. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still talking to the Managing Director of Cowry Asset Management, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. As we were saying, NERSAL FMB, why will it succeed, or why does the central bank think it will succeed where other initiatives have failed?
You know, as I was saying earlier, I have my concerns with that institution. In the first place, we are trying to create another national bank in the like of People's Bank. Whereas we have alternate existing channels that the central bank could have used, the federal government could have used to provide credit, microcredit at the rural areas at the lowest level, or those at the rung of the ladder. Very simple thing that we have in the microfinance bank that's supposed to be located within the vicinity of the small and medium scale entrepreneurs. They have direct access to this set of customers. So why don't we set up a wholesale financial institution that would lend to the microfinance bank, who will now lend to the ultimate small and medium scale entrepreneurs? Why do you want to create a national institution that will be located in all the local governments? For me, it just doesn't make sense in today's world. That's why I said, look, when you look at the economic policy of the government, we are dancing towards between command and control economy, where the government set up the operating businesses, and the operating businesses belong to the government. And then a balance between where the private sector drives economic activities. Because when you're talking of setting up a national financial institution that will provide microcredit at all the 900 and something local governments, 774 local governments, then what are you trying to create? You are creating an institution that is akin to what you used to have in the old Russia, USSR or China. For me, we should have gone beyond that.
Well, Johnson, before we move on, because at some point we're going to talk about the capitalization of banks as proposed.
Definitely.
But before then, somebody sent me a text message. You know, I don't know whether you would like to react to it. It says, "Good morning. Please ask Johnson to speak on the CBN governor's reference of the role of silo operators on stabilizing maize prices. Special greetings to Tundu. That's for you. That's an admirer.
Thank you.
Well, you had a question. Yeah.
Okay. Basic thing is that the silos were set up by the federal government, were eventually privatized, handed over to private sector operators. But the first thing is that in terms of stabilizing the maize price, the basic thing about the silo is that you're able to take products that have seasonality in terms of their yield or production and put them in locations or in warehouses, because the silos are basically warehouses, specialized warehouses, where you can manage supply in the sense that at off-season periods, you can actually still have enough to supply to the market. But the key thing about it is that we're not producing enough maize for local consumption, for industrial use. Two, the silos are located in places that are too far from the point where the feedstock, what in this kind of time, in this instance, maize, are produced. So the probability of moving the maize from where they are produced to the silos where they are located is very difficult. I'll give you an instance. The nearest silo to in my place is located on Okigwe, between Umuahia and Okigwe on the highway, on the federal government, the corridor run from Port Harcourt to Enugu. The villages where you produce this maize are all scattered far away from that. Even the maize producers do not even know where the silos are located. And the process of storing in those silos is not structured. So it's either you have outgrow people that will go out and buy those maize products and take to the silos, or you have the farmer that will go and store for themselves. But we don't have that structure. In as much as we have those silos, they are not operationally effective today.
Very true, sir. Now, while promoting our domestic economy, we're also trying to ensure that we're not necessarily going against our international trading partners or really and truly affecting a lot of relationships there, and also experiencing high tariffs being placed on our exports in retaliation, which is also a possibility. What can the Central Bank of Nigeria do to curtail this, especially also in terms of trade and investment policies? What sort of trade and investment policies can we see being used to ensure that we're encouraging local manufacturing and local production from international and formal trading partners?
Well, in the first place, the trade policy is that of the federal government. The central bank's role is that of monetary policy. But let's look at what kind of trade policies should the federal government come up with that will encourage export. You start from the foundation, which is the baseline. The baseline that we only have basic crude to export as it stands today. Our annual export of non-crude, non-oil products is only $4 billion today. So our export in terms of non-oil oil products is very minimal. So the first thing is that how do we grow our value chain of what we produce locally so that they qualify, they meet international export standards? That's the first thing. Then when you are able to produce products that are demanded outside your country, and then the cost of the production of those products are competitive, that's when you now talk of, let's have a trade policy that says, look, we have to create some level of barrier that are not inhibiting improvement in quality, that are not creating room for inefficiency. At the same time, that you also have a trade policy that, including your exchange rate policy, that will ensure that your products are not too expensive, because you also use your exchange rate policy to manage the competitiveness of your products in the international market.
Sorry to cut you short here, because we may be running out of time. I would like to have your thoughts on the recapitalization of the banks. The CBN governor has promised that the framework will be unveiled, but he has already, stated what the intention is, and the reaction to that has been quite mixed among stakeholders. What's your own take?
My take is that the central bank should not come up with a one-size-fits-all capital requirement. The capital requirement the central bank should come up with should be risk-based. We've moved beyond where you just have a one-size-fits-all capital requirement to risk-based capitalization requirement. If you even look at what we have on the ground today, you have 3 tiers or 4 tiers of banks in Nigeria. You have the merchant bank that requires capitalization of 10 billion naira. You have the commercial banks, the regional banks that have 15 billion capital requirement and capital adequacy ratio of 10%. You have the national banks that require 25 billion and capital adequacy ratio of 10%. You have the international bank, that is the Nigerian bank that are operating outside the country. They require 100 billion 100 billion naira capital requirement, and 15% capital adequacy ratio. But beyond that, you have also what the central bank categorizes as domestically systemic important banks. Those,
Tier 1 banks?
yeah, the tier 1 banks. Those domestically important, systemically important banks require capital adequacy ratio of 16%. So which means the central bank has also already defined some level of capital requirement based on the risk you take. But beyond that, if you look at the shareholders fund of Nigerian banks, these top 6 banks, which you may call tier 1 banks, or the most systemically important banks, have capital-based shareholders fund. Because when you talk of capital, you don't just talk of share capital, you also talk of the reserve that have been built over time. They have shareholders fund that range from 481 billion to 816 billion.
Even in excess of what the CBN is asking for.
Yeah, the CBN has not even specified, okay, in essence of what we have today.
Yeah.
But and if you talk of something like 491 billion, that's about $1.3 billion. The one that has 816 billion has capital base of about $2.23 billion. Are you going to come up with a capital requirement that will be above such threshold? So the basic thing for me is that the central bank will come up with a guideline, should come up with a guideline that require banks to carry the capital that will meet their risk profile, like their operations. It should be risk-based. Otherwise, you're going to have a capital base that is not profitable to investors. Because an investor will look at return on equity. I'm not going to put in money and have a return on equity that would decrease from current 15% to maybe 5%.
But do you think the stock market is strong enough to be able to absorb this recapitalization, or we're likely to see mergers and acquisitions, particularly as we're told at least about 3 banks, are having issues with capital adequacy ratio and liquidity ratio?
Well, if you look at the capital market, if you bring in instruments in the market that have very good yield, reasonably low risk, the market will mobilize funds for it. We saw what happened in MTN. We saw how people were scrambling for MTN. So basically, there must be value. Like I mentioned it, but if you come up with a capital requirement that will degrade the yield or the return on equities, people will back out of it. Good instruments will attract investment anywhere in the world.
So according to the proposal, bank recapitalization was listed under financial system stability, and the aim stated therein was to take Nigerian banks into the top 500 banks. But according to reports, 4 Nigerian banks have already cracked the top 500, namely First Bank, UBA, Zenith is at number 291.
Zenith has the highest shareholders fund in the country.
So what else is since that has been achieved already, what else is the practical impact on the economy of bank recapitalization?
I will take it from the first opening statement you made on financial system stability. What the central bank obviously is looking at to maintain financial system stability. When Ruben was speaking, he said there are about 3 banks that are short of the capital requirement. I know some banks have negative shareholders funds. So what the central bank is trying to do is the central bank is trying to find a way of resolving such deficiencies in share capital.
We'll discuss this in the break. We have to go on the break now.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.